morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Xylon, and I'm joined as always by Dr. David Lipman. I'm happy to admit my medical questions the last few weeks have not been great. This might not be a great one either. Why can athletes become dehydrated more easily in cold weather?
It's hard to understand the question properly, but let's double click on a couple of things here. One is athletes, and particularly if you're heat adapted, are going to have a higher sweat rate. So compared to, let's call it, average people, they might dehydrate more quickly. There's also an argument if you're training in cold weather, especially if it's dry, you might dehydrate quicker. But I don't think that's the case, like meaningfully. So let's go with that, mate. Let's go with sweat rates
So,
and call it a day at that.
okay, so the answer I have here is cold exposure reduces thirst sensation, obviously, and increases
Yep.
cold diuresis. Is that how you say that? Cold
Yep.
diuresis. The body
Diuresis.
dumps diuresis, where the body basically dumps more urine, while ventilation losses increase fluid loss.
I'm not convinced that your ventilation losses change between cold and hot. Certainly humid and dry, and altitude. Sure, not convinced of the rest of it. In terms of the cold-induced diuresis, yeah, I'm not sure. But the thirst thing's real, and it's certainly why, having talked to Andy Blow, the CEO of Precision, a bit, like when they're thinking about developing, or when people are thinking about developing a nutrition and hydration plan, you need to be considering how much you want to change that race to race, because cold and hot races, you may need to dissociate your fluid and your fueling, right? So people who want a liquid only strategy, you may struggle in the cold to get enough fuel in. So you may, for a cold race, want to split that versus in a hot race where you may be able to pair it together better.
Speaking of Andy Blow, Precision Fuel and Hydration, we are supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration. I checked out something very cool on the Instagram page. I was following a story they were tracking with former GB marathon runner Tina Muir, who says she used to struggle with underfueling during her past races. So she recently took on the brutal 100K Ultra Trail in Cape Town. So if you struggle with underfueling, how do you correct that then? How do you get enough carbohydrates on board to fuel for a race like that? She worked with Precision to track that. They documented it. So go and check that out on Precision Fuel and Hydration's Instagram page. By the way, if you'd like to check their products out, we do have a discount code for you, 15% off on your first purchase. That code is 1PB2025. That's the number one, PB2025. We also have a direct link in the show notes down below that'll apply that discount code automatically.
You can
David, we have some
also,
update.
well,
Yeah.
I was going to say, you can also work with their sports science team. You can book a call with their sports science team to have them help you if you're struggling like Tina as well. So I think, and that's a free service with no obligation to buy. So I think, like, let's double click there for a second for people. Like, that's pretty great. So feel free to go use that as well.
Yeah, there's a link in the show notes down below as well where you can hop onto choose a date in their calendar for that. We have some holiday updates coming up. You are going off to a beach somewhere, apparently. Is that true?
I'll be away briefly, mate. I would have been happy to record on the road, but it's you that's the fragile flower that needs the time away, mate. But yes, I'll be away. I'll be in Portugal. What about you? What are you doing for the holidays, mate?
I am going to the bush safari, Big Five. That's loyal listeners will know that's a love of mine, a passion of mine. So I'll be going to the Kruger National Park. I actually want to check out a book I was reading on one of the guests. So we batch recorded a whole bunch of amazing episodes that's coming up while we're away, and one of the guests we did that with was Mario Frioli. He's from the running famous newsletter, The Morning Shakeout. I was reading his newsletter, and he recommended a book in there that he reads every winter about taking a break, taking stock, coming back, refreshed, something you don't really understand. And that's what I do
It's very
every,
rude,
obviously,
mate.
I'm in the southern hemisphere. It's summer here. That's what I do every Christmas period is try to go to the bush, switch my phone off, recharge the batteries because my normal everyday life is very, very demanding. So really good to have reset moments, man. But we got some big episodes coming up, don't we? Some big interviews, man.
Yeah, massive ones. I think people are going to like them. Some of them have been long requested or long teased. Some of them are just going to be great. We've got AI in sport. We've got Mario Ferroli talking all things running, history of running. And we got, of course, Marco Altini, who kindly put out an Instagram story when we recorded, and we got some good feedback on that. So look for those coming up in the next couple of weeks. As a result, things like community shoutouts aren't going to be there, so our apologies. But we'll keep track of things. We will still engage with people, but we aren't going to be shouting you out for a while. Our apologies. But this is a way that we, keep delivering value to you guys. We think these are actually going to be really well enjoyed episodes. We're keeping delivering while we're away, but as a result, some things will change slightly. You'll notice a difference in episodes, but hopefully you still enjoy them.
I wanted to briefly talk about one of our partners, Stride, who've been supporting us on this podcast for the last few months. They are running Power Meter. We have a paper we're going to talk about with respect to coaches and technology. And one of the questions it has is about using data for decision making. Are you using Stride to alter your running?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can alter training, right? So you can alter it based on feedback. Has what I've done worked? I think a lot of people could do well to do that in general. Is my heart rate, pace, etc., changing in a positive way? There's another way you could do it, which is based on that. What do I do in the future? So sort of a feed forward mechanism, and those can be on short or long term timeframes, right? Let's call it short term days, weeks, long term weeks, months. So yeah, you certainly do those things. For me, I've been tracking my long-term trends of things like some of the gait metrics. So we talked about leg spring stiffness on a previous podcast. That's one of the key metrics that I track long-term. And I look at that between shoes and see if that's tracking in the right direction, because it's something I'm particularly interested in left-right balance with that, given my Achilles issues history. I'm also like reviewing my sort of durability, as we talked about last week on the podcast. I try and make sure that I don't start falling to pieces towards the end of a run, because it's a bit of an injury risk for me, because I'm not doing much long running, and I have a tendency to want to go out and just do it, right? So like, we talked about last week, just went out with Aiden and did sort of 20Ks. Because I'm not doing much long stuff, that becomes riskier and riskier for me as I get further and further away from marathon training. So keeping an eye on those metrics to make sure that I don't creep in the wrong way. There's also a thing they have called running stress balance, which is an indication of mechanical loading. And I'm keeping an eye on that to make sure it's not excessive at any point. Again, looking at, for me, my history has been musculoskeletal injuries. It's been my limiter in running. So keeping an eye on that. And then, it's almost made worse by the fact that I'm doing heat training, because I'm probably centrally fitter than I am peripherally. And then I'm finding critical power helpful to keep an eye on my training as a sort of performance metric, given that's, I could go do a time trial if I wanted to, and it would be similar, but this is a nice way to do it. I don't have to go really put myself in a locker to get an idea of where I'm at.
If you'd like to check out Stride Running Power Meters, we do have a unique link to our podcast in the show notes down below. So please click on that. It helps us very, very much. Did you see how well the Dr. Tommy Wood episode is doing?
Yeah, had quite a bit of good feedback about it. Specifically, thanks to Matt Hawkins and Steve Lacey for reaching out about it. I've passed some of that feedback on to Tommy. He's ecstatic to hear it. He's very appreciative that we passed on feedback. I think it's something podcast hosts should be doing, is if people like the guests, let the guests know. Or if they don't like them, let them know what they can improve, right? So we all should be looking to get better for feedback. 1%, 10% better, who knows? But the point being, we appreciate all the feedback people get. If you like something, do let us know, because it will mean we double click on it again and talk to that person again, or touch on the topic again, etc. So we would appreciate that either on, you can do it on Spotify, you can send us DM on Instagram, whatever means you have of connecting with us. Comment on YouTube. Of course, the more public the forum and the more you comment there, the more helpful it is for us to grow in the algorithm. So take note of that, but we'll take them any way we get them.
Yeah, one way to let us know that you do like us is by subscribing. So we'd really appreciate if you do that. We do have some updates coming up. Things will change slightly in the short to near future. I think I announced a while ago that I will be undergoing a spinal fusion in early January. Loyal listeners will know that I've been having back problems for the last year, and I've been trying to avoid a spinal fusion at all costs. It has come to that now. So surgery is scheduled for mid-Jan. So that'll put me out for a while. We won't stop putting out episodes, though. You've noticed we put out episodes through Christmas, through New Year. This hustle is real. We are here for you, and we try to give you as much value as we can. But David, that might alter slightly depending on our availability.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure your availability will be minimal to none for a period of time there. The question is like, how do we keep delivering value and making it all work? So we're currently discussing this, discussing getting a video editor because you do a lot of the video editing. So we're discussing what that will cost, if that's feasible for us. Otherwise, are we going to put out audio only? What does that mean, etc. But rest assured, it's not going to be me solo talking into a mic. I've got some ideas about guests and those sort of things. And I think they'll be cool episodes. It certainly changes the format a little bit, which I think will be cool for people. And I'm excited. You know, we've got some big plans when you're back. So, you know, I don't want to look too far ahead, but I'm excited for the opportunity for change for a bit and excited for the opportunity of you coming back as well.
Yeah. So yeah, if you see in the new year, January, February, things are slightly different. Just remember what we just told you now. We are.
Also, if you happen to be only following and consuming us on YouTube, it may be an idea in the new year to like make sure you've got an audio subscription as well, just so you can. Yeah, because if we don't do video, we're not going to upload it to YouTube. I'm not going to do audio only going to YouTube. That's a mess. I don't think that's great. So apologies there, team.
We are sponsored by Core Body Temperature Sensors. And coming up in this episode, we're going to talk to Alfie Manthorpe, one of their athletes, who gives us insight into his running as an elite runner. And he's got some pretty cool announcements as to right now, he's been doing shorter distance stuff, but he is moving up to the middle and longer distance stuff. So he gave us a bit of insight and also broke down his training for us. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But we do have a competition loading with Core Body Temperature, David.
Yeah, this is cool. Like, it's part of what we were doing with them. We sort of talked to them about how we structured the last quarter of the year with them. And one of the things they said to us is you've got to, you know, they were talking about sending you a sensor, and we decided kindly to put that up with our fans, given you're not going to be doing training for a while. So, you know, I think we tossed and turned about how to do this, but we're going to keep it simple. So make sure you follow us and Core on Instagram. We're going to put out a post. Xylon will put out a post next week, or when this goes live, rather. So you can comment on that post and then tag a friend, 1 entry per person, fair terms and use apply. So we'd love that friend to be somebody that doesn't follow us, but you know, if you can do that as well. And we'll draw a winner and announce it on the podcast on December 19th is the plan. So that's when we're planning to announce our winner there.
Yeah, so make sure you go onto our Instagram, 1% Better Pod. That is the handle, and check us out there. Okay, right. Let's get into this sporting world. What's come across my desk this week? Some quick bits for you. I know we discussed this a bit the last few weeks. So I'd like to tug on this thread because there have been some developments. It looks like the Premier League, that's football slash soccer in the UK, are implementing some salary cap features where teams have voted on some new adaptations as it pertains to financial fair play.
Yeah, so we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and this is, you know, you sent this to me. This looks like the outcomes of that. So they voted against top to bottom anchoring, which would have been a model where basically spending of the top teams was limited by the TV earnings of the lowest clubs. So that was canned, and the thought there was that the league or the league's teams would not be able to perform in Europe if that was the case. So I thought that was quite interesting that they sort of made a decision for the betterment of everybody, or the league, or the league's representatives in Europe. They did vote in squad cost ratio and sustainability and system resilience. We'll talk about what those are. So, squad cost ratio broadly covers basically 1 year of club activity, except for player sales, which are averaged over 3 years. And this is a season. So, in the Europe competition, it's done calendar year. In Premier League, it is done season by season. And so the salary cap, squad cost ratio puts a direct limit on how much teams can spend, and this includes on the head coach, and it's tied to their football revenue. So basically, it's what they earn there. They can't sell off other assets, which has previously been the case. You've been able to sell off other assets, and that's earned you money there,
Yeah,
right? So
teams
there's
have
no,
sold off their women's teams to themselves, their hotels to
yeah,
themselves, etc.
exactly. And also, because your player cost is amortized out over 3 years and averaged, you can't quickly dump salary and therefore make money. So they're trying to make sure people are in order longer term, right? So costs are assessed under the SCR that include player, head coach wages, agent fees, and amortization of impairment. So when a club writes down a player's value in their books or transfer fees, so again, that's over 3 years. It's it's in continuation of the old PSR regime. Costs relating to women's teams and youth teams are excluded from these purposes. So I think that's really important. You can't get rid of women and youth to drop money because that would be an easy target for these teams. So to allow for swift punishment, because part of the problems previously has been around sort of delayed punishment, they'll look at compliance in March 1st of each year. If the squad cost ratio is equal to or less than 85%, they will be deemed compliant. If not, they'll be assessed again, subject to accounts confirmation test, and that'll be the end of the season in June. And there's reasons for this. So the SCR differs between leagues. So for the UEFA regulations, the limit is set at 70%, while Premier League is 85%. And I think this is smart because the teams that play in Europe are going to be higher profit by virtue of being in Europe, etc. So that probably aligns. 70% probably aligns with 85% of the lower teams there. So I think it keeps it more equal. But they do have these two thresholds you'll read about. The green threshold, which is 85% of the, and what they do is they estimate their revenue for the season. Right? So they estimate it, they can be at 85% of that. And you can exceed that by up to 30%. So it makes you 115% of your earnings, which then hits the red threshold. Below 115% of this red threshold, there's no sporting penalty, so no points. But if the club exceeds the green threshold, their following season's red threshold is reduced by the size of the excess. So if you're 5% over, the following year you can be at 110%. In each season that they are compliant, they increase their red threshold by 10%. So you recoup that back up to the maximum 30%. In explaining why clubs will be allowed to exceed it, it's going to, without sporting sanction, the Premier League said it allows for clubs to invest ahead of revenue and reasonable variance or genuine sporting underperformance throughout the season, right? Because that's the thing is, if you don't play well, fans don't come or whatever, yeah, it's a problem. So there's also not going to be any fines in the first season because it's going to take time for them to get good at get used to this.
Figure this out.
Fines will be based on the percentage they went over the green threshold and by the amount. So if you went over 5% and 100,000 GBP, the fine will be 5% of that amount. Right, so if you went over by 100,000, which is 5%, then you'll find 5,000. The red threshold automatically generate a minimum 6-point deduction after the first season, and a further point will be taken off for every 6.5 million pounds that are exceeding the red threshold. Crucially, there's a clear departure from the PSR regime. Clubs will be punished in the season of their breach, which prevents problems with winning titles and promotion relegation stuff.
Yeah.
The SCR covering only a single season should theoretically mean more scope for squad investment by the Premier League's newest entrants, right? This is especially the case if you choose to accept the financial hit of going over the green threshold in your first year. So, interestingly, all 20 clubs voted for the SSR, perhaps reflecting the lack of concern they have for breaching it. The requirements of it will impose on clubs are varied and point towards moving them away from short-term thinking, which I think is good. Those requirements spread across 3 tests mentioned include clubs having to show continued monthly access to at least 12.5 million pounds in cash or working capital, clubs demonstrating their ability to withstand a stress test, whereby they suffer a theoretical 85 million pound financial hit, and ostensibly to mirror the potential impact of relegation. The clubs need to show assets outweigh liabilities, though. Crucially, they'll be allowed to include player valuations at market value rather than book value.
Interesting. Wow. Interesting to see sports growing and growing up. And I think a lot of the changes here have been based on what's been happening with Man City. I mean, they've been accused and they've been in court in arbitration with regards to many laws that they have breached, and that hasn't been resolved yet. And if it does get resolved, it's like from seasons back. So do they lose those titles that they won? So it's interesting to see that they are addressing those concerns here. Very good.
Yeah, I think it's got to be season of. It can't be season after.
Okay, let's move on then. We spoke last week about coaches' perspectives on evolution of training. You found a similar paper this week now, but more relatable, more related to wearables. The paper is entitled Global Insights on Wearable Technology Adoption by Coaches, Determinant of Current Use, Decision Making, and Future Intention to Use. Sounds very interesting, was it?
Yeah, I actually spoke to one of the authors the other day. We were talking about some other stuff, and then he mentioned this paper, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great paper." And then I happened to find the paper independently of that as well. So, as you said, similar to last week to some degree, or similar process certainly, and then similar in nature, I guess, to some degree. You're talking about coaches, you're surveying them, etc. In this context, they surveyed 130 coaches from 14 countries. 119 were male, 9 were female, and then 2 did not indicate. The mean age was 42 plus or minus 11 years. So you're talking about a range of, for most people, like 31 to 53. Now that's important given, tech adoption to some degree mirrors age. So anyway, coaches originated from 64% Italian, 11.4% UK, 8.5% Switzerland, 4.6% Belgium, 3% Germany, 2.3% Sweden. Austria was 0.7. So the rest of these are probably one coach. So Austria, Greece, Iran, Netherlands, Norway, Spain, United States, and Poland. So the main sports they were the coaches were involved in. So triathlon was 49%, running was 17.7%, cycling was 6.9, track and field was 6.5, swimming was 6.15, swimming was 6.15, cross country skiing was 2.31, rowing zero point 0.7. So again, zero point 0.7 is probably one person. So it's rowing, alpine skiing, golf, handball, kayak, football, short track, speed skating, and hockey.
But a very nice, diverse field. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that was the goal here. Knowing the researcher, he's or one of the key researchers, he's pretty well connected around this, well read in the industry, and well respected in the industry. So um, basically, coaches were pretty hesitant to learn about tech, and output quality and perceived usefulness were key. So it makes sense, right? You're not going to use it if you don't think it's going to be useful. If the output sucks, you're not going to use it. But ease of use is highlighted as well, but they were hesitant to learn about it. So I think this speaks to how hard this stuff is, right? Because when you're trying to build something, it needs to be easy, but it needs to be perceived as useful, and it needs to have high quality output, and all those things. They're not in opposition to each other, but they take a while to build, right? And these companies may die before this happens. Um, so it's really hard for them in that respect. But also, like, if you want to build something meaningful, it may not be that simple, right? And like you want to try and make it simple, but it may not be that simple. So, yeah, like a, people generally prefer a simple falsehood to a nuanced truth, and that's difficult when you're doing this stuff, particularly if you're trying to keep scientists happy as well. So for the coaches, heart rate data was 88.5% of the coaches said was the most useful, followed by GPS derived parameters for 87.7% of coaches. Remembering most of these coaches came from triathlon, running, and cycling. Heart rate variability was 46.9% of coaches, and we have an episode on that coming up with Marco Altini. And then sleep related parameters said 45.4. I probably could have guessed this, that they would say it in roughly those proportions. So a Likert scale is what they use here for some of the other stuff. And a Likert scale is kind of, completely disagree, somewhat disagree, etc. And it's just sort of on a 1 to 7 scale in this context. So coaches reported 4.5 plus or minus 1.4, so somewhat agree, that wearable technology influences their decision making. So
Hmm.
we'll get into some of the implications here, but current use of wearable technology showed a significant positive association with perceived job relevance, which is to
Why,
say, like,
why are you saying it with that tone? What does that mean?
basically some of these people are probably making a bit of a career out of this wearable data, like
Hmm.
how relevant it is. So particularly, like, there's a lot of nuance in this paper, but my takeaways from this are coaches are probably undereducated and underutilizing tech. They want to use it. They think it's important for their job, um, but they're probably not using it to make that many decisions. So they're just
Yeah.
collecting it. It seems like a bit of a fool's errand in the way that it's being used in some of these cases. Now, some of that's probably to do with just how much data there is. Some of it's to do with difficulty around it. Some of it may be because they have an expert eye already, and so the data is not adding a lot because they can kind of tell a lot. Um, and then some of it's just probably just they're just time poor. Like, you have to crawl through data to understand a training session to then make decision. Like, it's hard. But with things like sleep, HRV, like that stuff's pretty go no go. I'm hoping that does influence things. but maybe the athlete's making that decision rather than the coaches. So it's hard to know there.
Interesting. No, that was very interesting. Any chance we'll get that researcher on the pod anytime soon?
I could certainly ask him to come on. We were talking about doing a series on educating coaches on wearables. We ended up not doing it. I think probably for time reasons. He's a busy dude, like young dude, super successful professor. I'm sure he'd be willing to come on the podcast. The question is just what we need to talk to him about. So this is often the thing, right? We had Marco Altini put out a story when we were recording the podcast, and people were like, "Oh, finally!" And I was like, "Well, some of it's about timing, right? In terms of there's a reason to have them on or not." And some of them, if it's something like Marco with an evergreen topic, it's kind of like, where does that make sense to put it for us?
Yeah.
Because we try and keep things relatively topical. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So we can certainly get this guy on. He'd be willing to, but yeah, we'll see if there's something that makes sense.
Well, thanks for finding that. Should we get to our guest on this week's episode? You and I sort of had, I don't know why, mostly preconceived ideas as to how this interview might go. And that's mostly because we didn't know Alfie Manthorpe. We were very pleasantly surprised at how that he listens to the podcast, that, yeah, just how screwed on he is, man. He's head on is, man. He's on it. I love meeting athletes who are so well rounded, who aren't just like robots, like a metronome, and that's all they know what to do. I found that very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think I've talked to you about this before, but my thesis is that for successful athletes, there are only two archetypes at work, and they're the ends of the spectrum. The like absolute robot doesn't know anything, just does what's written down. If you write 10 instead of 5, he does 10 and like doesn't question it, or she. The other side of that spectrum is where Alfie lies, where it's like highly engaged, highly questioning, wants to co-create their own training if you're a coach with them, or coaches themselves, etc. And like those two sort of things come strike me as the two successful ways. That middle ground is sort of a valley of death when you're kind of not as engaged as Alfie, but not quite disengaged either. So, yeah.
Right. Don't take our word for it. Here's Alfie Manthorpe. Alfie Manthorpe is a British professional distance runner supported by 247 and MyProtein and known for his rapid ascent through the UK endurance scene and his breakthrough performance on the road, track, and cross country circuits. Born in 1999 and raised in Sheffield, Manthorpe represents Hallamshire Harriers and has become one of the most exciting emerging talents in British distance running. A former standout junior, Alfie first made waves in the national stage with podium performances in cross country and impressive times over the 5K and 10K distances. His big career jump came in 2021 when he won the English National 10K Championship, beating many established senior athletes, a result that firmly put him on the radar of British athletics. Manthorpe continued his rise by earning Great Britain and Northern Ireland selection for multiple international events, including the 2023 European Cross Country Championships in Brussels. By 2023-2024, Alfie had transitioned smoothly into elite senior competition, posting strong results in major UK road races such as the Great North Run, Podium 5K, and Telford 10K, while also lowering his PBs across multiple distances. 2025 again saw him rewrite many PBs, which now stand at 13:46 in the 5,000 meter, 28:12 in the 10,000 meter, 28:14 in the 10K, and 61:26 in the Valencia half marathon, where he was the top British finisher and 14th overall. Alfie is also head of running at March On Training. He joins us today on behalf of our sponsor, Core. Alfie, welcome to 1% Better. Great to have you here, man.
No, thank you for having me. As a long-time listener, I'm happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate all of that, and again, congratulate you on air for that result in Valencia. That was huge. We definitely talked about it at the time, and yeah, really big day. Some huge scalps, and of course, I'm sure really enjoyable day for you. But I think let's start up for context for people, because I think this is an interesting part of you. Is like, what does a training week look like for you? Because I think this will frame things up nicely for the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of running throughout the whole week, and it's because I'm self-coached at the minute. It's mostly stuff I've sort of brought in from different philosophies, and then other people I've worked with in the past. So the minute right now, it's double easy run Monday,
Mm-hmm.
a double threshold day on Tuesday, usually LT1 in the morning around
Yep.
like 6 times 2K in the morning, and
Yep.
then LT2 in the evening. K reps or 400s is usually the most common. Wednesday would be a medium long run in the morning, and then just a training session, an easy run in the evening with gym. Thursday would be the same as Monday, so just a double easy day. And then Friday would be a more specific session. So if I'm in the half marathon block, most of the time it's a bit slower than half marathon pace, and then kind of progressing down throughout the session. And then Saturday would be the same as Monday and Thursday, and then Sunday would be a long run session with gym. And then heat training and core. So heat training fits in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday most of the time. If I can get an extra one in, I'll try to. And then core is just put in throughout the week as well. But I would say gym and core sessions is definitely something that gets neglected from time to time, which I'm trying to get better at, but it's definitely the last thing on my priority list, which is showed dividends, I think, in recent cross-country results with how much I struggled on the mud. So I definitely need to get back to getting in more gym. So
Well,
yeah, around 190, 200K a week though.
Yeah, okay, that's big. So I do some running with somebody who's helping me with a bit of gym work. Peter Tierney's a friend of mine. So yeah, I'll make sure to report back to Peter that you've been neglecting a little bit of gym work, and I'm sure he'll be happy to hear it.
Yeah, a bit too much. A bit too much.
No, I think that's pretty common for runners. I think it's a universal story. Is when you're going well and in a good block, it's always the thing that gets pushed to the back end. And then if something's not going so well, double down on some gym, prioritize it for a bit, and then as things go, you sort of taper off again. So I don't think you're alone in that. Does that training change across a year? You sort of alluded to specific sessions for races, so say a 10K or a half marathon. But aside from that, does it change much across a year?
Yeah, it ultimately depends on what I'm training for. I think the beauty of half marathon and eventual marathon training soon would be it's essentially almost base period all the way around with a bit more stimulus and intensity as you get closer to race day. I'd say at the start of my season or the start of the block where I'm just purely in base, that would be a bit more relaxed. So sometimes I'd either look at maybe doing, rather than a specific day on the Friday, it'd actually just be another double threshold day where I'm just making sure I'm not sort of going through the intensity as much. And then Sunday's long run session would be a bit more purely just a progressive long run, so it wouldn't be as intense on that day as well. I tried to stay out of carbon shoes completely in a base block as well. So that's kind of how it changes. And then if I was training for a 5K or a 10K or the track, obviously again more stimulus and mechanical focus comes in. A bit more intensity in the strides, a bit more. I might add a few more hill sprints in there, and then obviously a bit more VO2 max work as well on the track, and those shorter, sharper sessions will produce a bit more lactic. But ultimately, I'd say for the most part, it is kind of just base training and then half marathon training. And even
Yep.
for a 10K, most of it would be those sort of half marathon specific pace sessions on a Friday, because I think that kind of is threshold anyway. It's just a bit, more sustained. And that's kind of what I do most of the time. I like to keep volume high and then cut and get aggressive, find a race before a race, then use that as the sharpener.
Yep.
I just love high volume, really.
Yeah, and that makes sense, particularly in someone who's as quick as you over the half. To keep like 10K and half training is much more similar in someone like you than it would be for someone who's say a 90-minute half marathon runner, just given the time durations are so different. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One of the questions we had was, building off what you got there is, so why self-coached? What motivated you to make that choice?
So to be honest, it was. I'm always one who loves to learn everything I possibly can, whether that's running, that could be business related or anything really. I'm quite addicted. Like yesterday, I bought an air purifier for my apartment, and I've been checking the data all the time and like trying to find how to improve it slightly. Just everything I do is always about that. So when I was coached, um, I had a childhood coach who was terrible. At the time, I didn't realize it was terrible because I didn't know anything about running. And then I changed coaches when I was about 18 and progressed a lot. And then I kind of, I guess, outgrew that setup because it was still like a university setup. But in the UK, obviously, it's not the same as an American university setup. So I just started looking more and more into my own coaching, reading about mostly the work of Marius Bakken
Mhm.
and things like that. And I just was like, well, let's give this a go. Tried it for a bit whilst still being coached by my old coach. So I was like overlapping the training sensibly. Along the way, I learned some mistakes, obviously, and just tried to learn as much as possible. And then I joined New Balance briefly last year around April, and the training just didn't suit me as much as some other people in the group progressed a lot. It just didn't suit me at all. So then I was like, I'll just go back to just go all in on this training, high volume, double threshold training most of the year, and that just worked really well for me. I PB'd in every event, and in the build up to some races this year, I worked with someone briefly who just helped me learn the next level and develop again. And I'm not working with him right now, and I would do again. So the self-coach thing is just because I'm not working with this person anymore. But it's quite a natural fit. I do really try to learn as much research as possible, go into the science, read all the research papers, and just try and optimize. So I can keep myself accountable as well. So I think that's the main strength and maybe the main issue other people would have, where they always try to push the boundaries, and the opposite of that would be skip a session because they're telling them, So I'm very objective with it, so it allows me to keep accountable.
Yeah, I agree with the holding back bit. The skipping sessions is not much done in runners. I think too type A for that, but I think it's a point well made though. You talked about the double threshold. Are you taking your own lactates there? Have you dialed in feel enough? Where do you lie on that spectrum?
So I was using feel and heart rate for almost all of it. To be fair, it was feel and heart rate after a lab test. So I did know my heart rate at a certain lactate level, and I was just going off that purely because lactic strips are very expensive.
Yep.
But I've managed to find an actual lactate meter and strips what you can get from a much bigger discount. And my main concern was that they weren't effective. So I A/B tested it with the top of the range test and stuff, and it was accurate. So since then, maybe for about the last month, I've started using strips in my training, but the levels are exactly where I thought they were before I was using the testing strips anyway.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's the way to do it. If you can afford them, it makes a big difference. But yeah, the feeling is key as well. Is there? I mean, aside from being self-coached and some of the tweaks you made, you've run pretty much PB across everything this year. Is there anything else you'd put that down to, or is it just about consistency, timing, and then like some of the work you've been doing, the volume?
I think it is just consistency and increasing volume. It's other than that, I do always try to look for new stimuluses. So heat training being one.
Yep.
Changing my strides a bit in terms of mechanical focus, doing things a bit different in the gym. So there is those things, but I think that's just always a natural progression in running anyway. And even though I've made a jump in some races this year, I feel like the running world is always making a jump anyway. And I think everyone's just getting better and better each year at the minute. So it's kind of just something that has to be done. But I do feel like a lot of that comes down to the whole transition for most people doing more volume and starting to heat train, maybe more people going to altitude, just key needle movers, let's say, just start to do a lot more of that stuff. And also as you become more confident in your training, it also means you can be a bit more aggressive on race day. And that's something that I've done as well, where for example, the Valencia half marathon, I think I went through 10 seconds or 15 seconds slower than my 10K PB. No way I would have even attempted that 6 months before. So it's a confidence in your training thing as well.
Alfie, how old are you now? You seem young, but at the same time, you seem very matured for your age. And then coupled with that, I want to ask you, because you're so hungry for knowledge and coaching yourself, do you feel compared to your peers who might be getting coaching, you understand why you're doing certain sessions and understand compared to them for someone being on the younger side, why you're doing certain things and the reason behind it?
Yeah, I'm 26, which I know I don't look 26, but yeah, I'm a bit
I was going to
older
go with
than I
like
look.
22, man.
Yeah, I get it a lot, and it's usually people, like, if I'm on a training camp or something, go, "Oh, how old are you?" And they think I'm like some 19-year-old prodigy or something. I go, "No, I'm 26," and the disappointment in the face just instantly comes along. But yeah, I think whilst I've been self-coached, I kind of view training not so much as how I think other people view it, as like, I'm doing this session and it works, and I think that's all that matters. Like, even if someone's coached by someone, you have got to have faith in the system, at least that it works. Whereas the way I see it, I just see it as almost a stimulus and an adaptation from that session. That's how I see the week. It's all about the adaptation I get from that session and the specific purpose. Of course, there's consistency of just easy mileage, which you can't really take out as one run and go, you're going to get this adaptation stimulus, because it's more of a cumulative thing. But I just visualize it as, why am I doing this session, and break it down to know why I'm doing it, and then also optimize it for the reason I'm doing it. So if there's a specific session for a 5K that I'm trying to get a bit more of a mechanical focus out of, And if there's no other reason for doing it other than that, I would try to make sure that that reason is amplified as much as possible. And I'd also try to make sure that I'm not restricting that reason anymore. So if it's supposed to be a hard session and I'm doing 200K a week, then I'm not going to be able to train well on that hard session. So if I have a really hard session in my block, I try to make it not as hard, so I can actually run the pace as required. So there's a lot of variation like that, which I think people maybe who are coached by someone would just take for granted, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the understanding you have of training and the way you think about it affects your ability to execute those sessions. Because if it's not going well, if you understand it and if you don't understand it and your coach isn't there, you can't modify it appropriately. If you do understand it, and or if you have a coach that's there, they can modify it. Say, hey, the goal is mechanical stimulus. You can't hold that that effort or that speed for this duration. Therefore, let's cut the duration down rather than let's change it up another way. Right. So it allows you to modify it as appropriate rather than make it easier another way that's inappropriate, so to speak. But let's talk a little bit about Valencia. Obviously, big result for you. How do you feel about that? Because I mean, like, it's a big result, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily happy or unhappy. You get to decide how you feel about it. So, how are you feeling about it? And were you surprised, or did you know you were on for one that day?
On the day, as soon as we were in the race, I was like, this is going to be a good day. Before it, though, the way I train, you don't really have a concept of the exact level of fitness, because most sessions are just fatigued and quite tired anyway. So pre-race, if you told me I'd run 61:26 and be the first Brit home, I'd be over the moon. But with the way the race transpired, I was a bit disappointed with the end result in terms of the time. But I think that was mostly just because the group I was in with Alex Yee, Rory Leonard until he dropped out, and some other Brits, and then obviously the other runners as well. We were just on for around 60 high, I think, through 16K. And then the last 6 or 7K, it started to get a bit windy. And I think when everyone's running on the edge of their threshold, essentially, and then there's wind, as soon as you creep over that intensity, you fall off a cliff. And everyone was, I don't think anyone did that, but we were all trying not to do that. So we all just went from taking the lead and sharing it and running fast to just being wide across the road. And it was almost like mutual self-destruction. We were just like, oh, we're all going to slow down now. So I was disappointed with the time in the end, but overall, I was very happy with the time and the result. It's just the way the race happened. There's a bit of a bittersweetness about the official time.
Yeah, and thankfully there's more meat on the bone for you there than in that context. But I reckon Valencia's got that wind all the time. I had a similar experience there where, like, as you turn that last little bit to run into the home straight, it's always this block headwind, pretty rough. So yeah, I know that feeling. Not quite as fast, but I know that feeling in terms of like, yep, we're on one here, and it's like, maybe not.
The 10K is the same, but I think I'm almost willing to have that wind if it means I get in an absolute incredible race with almost perfect temperature and perfect course with no elevation. It's a trade-off I'm willing to have because everyone runs fast in Valencia. So
yeah, it's a good point. It's the Dutch hills is the wind because there are none in the Netherlands. So obviously a big result for you. You sort of alluded to the marathon before. Where is your future? Like, what do you see the next little while looking like for you from an events perspective? Like, I know you do quite a bit of cross country. Is it going to be a mix of cross country and the longer roads, or are you going to keep some track and some short road stuff in?
So I actually wrote out my entire plan until April yesterday. Or the draft of my entire plan. So at the minute I'm looking at hopefully the Valencia 10K the start of January.
Yep.
Maybe the World Cross Country Championships, but I need to qualify for that. And there's quite a lot of reasons for me not to qualify right now with the cross country race that happened at the weekend. I didn't qualify for the European, so it'd be very hard for me to get to the Worlds now. But there is some certain events what could happen where I do make the team. So one of those races early Jan, and then after that it's the Bath Half Marathon in February or March, I believe,
Yep.
and in March, and that is a trial for the World Championships for the half. And then I'll probably be looking to do London Marathon in April as my marathon debut. It was originally Seville, but because of the half marathon, I didn't want to do Seville in February and then come back for the trial in March. I feel like that would probably be too much of an ask for me.
Yeah, I think that's a wise decision. That's absolutely fascinating. So what do you need to do to qualify for World Half? Do you need a place there, or is it a time, or all of the above?
So at the minute, I believe it's if you get top 4 on the day in the trial and you've got the standard, you go. basically. I've already got the time because I think it's 62 flat.
Yeah.
So I just need to come top 4 on the day. There's still a chance to get selected if I don't come top 4, depending on who does finish top 4.
Yep.
But the goal is to just go there and place
Yeah.
in the top 4 and then guarantee selection.
Yeah. Go there, race the race, and see how you go and get that experience. And so it sounds like cross country is still part of your plans in the short term. Is it something you're going to keep doing long term?
I would always do the trial I just did at the weekend,
Yep.
just purely because it fits in quite well to winter training. Although I think the way that road shoes have gone now with the plates and the stack height, getting your body ready to run in spikes, even on grass, is a much different ask to getting ready to run on the road. So as I found out in my cross country races this year, putting on spikes exclusively for those races, I just can't produce the power or the turnover I need at the minute. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be training in spikes just to prep for one cross country race unless there's a reason that I'm not doing any other road races at that time. So although I will still do that trial, I don't know if it'll ever be a priority over training for Valencia half marathon, for example, or the Valencia marathon. At that time of year, they're probably the target race I'll look for in the future.
And just a quick, simple question. It's probably a stupid question, but earlier you said in most of your blocks too, you don't use carbon shoes on the road, and I guess you only put them on for race day. Then why do you do that?
So especially in base training, for me, I feel like running as a kid with basically every single shoe was terrible compared to how they are now. And it's actually a skill, I think, to have mechanical efficiency, especially in your Achilles, your ankle, and that tension you can provide. And even though obviously on race day, a carbon plated shoe does most of that work, I have noticed an improvement in efficiency when I still have the mechanical efficiency of my actual body as well as the carbon shoe. So for me, it's doing that to keep that there because I feel like it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. And it also, for me, it's just a nice mental transition. As soon as I get into, say, if I have a harder session, I'll be like, right, I can wear carbons today, and it just allows you to go through the motions a bit more. But mostly the mechanical training, because I do think, especially with running 200k a week, either in high stack shoes, really good foam, or carbon shoes, there is a lot of a mechanical benefit that's left on the table if you don't train in shoes what are, I guess, low efficiency or high efficiency. I think the Norwegian podcast or the Norwegian training method calls it, right?
Yeah, that's what Olaf talks about with it for sure. I've started to subscribe to that more and more myself, actually. With respect to that, so you don't see spikes as an extension of that, or is it just it's too much cost to that? Because there's obviously a cost to these things, right? Like take away the carbon plates, now costs you more to run like that from a mechanical standpoint. And you could say the extension of that is in spikes, which could be too much stress, or it could be the right amount of stress. Depends on how you think about it.
Yeah, to be honest, it's one of the things I've thought about for this block, whether to spike up or actually bring out. Can you remember the Nike Streak LT? I've still got one of those, which is, I don't even know the stuff on that.
You got to sell that thing. You can't use it. You got to sell it now.
I've been keeping them. I love collecting shoes and keeping them. Like my cupboard at home, I must have. I don't even want to say how many running shoes I've got. Actually, it's way too many. But I was tempted to get that out or a spike to do strides in once or twice a week. It's just, like you said, the trade-off though is that's definitely going to provide much more load in my calf and Achilles. And if I'm running 200k a week, where do I balance that? I think once a week in a flat would be great, but also even on my easy runs, I try to run in either a stability shoe, which is a bit firmer and not as good, or just a general basic, like a brand's budget shoe, which I know for a lot of people listening to this are probably the general population, getting a high stack shoe and get comfy and protected. But I just like to kind of switch on my mechanics a bit more. So I'd run in worse shoes quite a lot as well.
Yeah. And it's also like you run in so many shoes in a week and so many kilometers. It's like a different, your running isn't my running, isn't the average person's running. Like everything's different. So context is really important there. But let's double click on this because you mentioned you were with New Balance previously. You're obviously with 247, which is a clothing brand now. Is that an intentional choice to allow yourself more footwear? And we talked to Colleen Quigley on this podcast about non-endemic sponsors and the opportunities they provide. And I think there's something there. Is that something you've been doing actively?
Yeah, it was definitely my intention when I signed. 247, I was a massive fan of before, so it just worked at the time. But now, the reason I've not signed with anyone yet is because of the the choice of shoes. It's kind of going the same as self-coaching, right?
Yep.
The main issue is having restriction or not being able to fully choose what you want to do. Whereas if you're with a single shoe brand, obviously that restriction is in place. But then the other side of that is there's so many shoes that I want to try them all, and you kind of always get a bit anxious about, am I in the right shoes? So it is quite a simpler life to be sponsored, and I'm working on something at the minute, to be honest with you, where that would
Okay.
change anyway. But it has to be the right fit. It can't just be. Well, the reason New Balance didn't work is one of the reasons was I didn't like the shoes at all.
Yep.
And then if your profession is road racing and the road racing shoe isn't competitive,
Yep.
then it's kind of what you're doing, really. So
Yeah. I know, I can't remember her name now. I've got her face. Nell Rojas was an Adidas athlete briefly, and then ended up having to give back her like some money and cancel a contract because she just didn't get on with the shoes, right? And I think is a huge part of it, which is really difficult. If shoe brands are the primary way you earn money as a runner and you don't have options, life gets very difficult. So it'd be good to see. I mean, I know Sports Shoes in the UK steps in and sponsors some athletes. Something like that, I think, is ideal for athletes because you're just running what you want then. And of course, they'll want to push certain things. And okay, yeah, we can do that. But you're allowed an amount of choice there, which I think, the old school version of that is probably before your time, is being sponsored by the local like specialty running store, and they give you a discount on shoes. So yeah, it's I like what's going on there. But you've already sort of touched on the events you've got next year. What will modify the second half of the year for you, right? So you talked about, you've got London Marathon. What's going to change your trajectory next year? Does it, obviously winning London changes your life, but does it change your trajectory? Yeah.
I think it's always the case of how quick I run in certain races will dictate a lot. So me running that speed in Valencia then meant I had to do the trial. If I didn't run the time, I wouldn't do the trial for the World Championships. So in London, if I run sub 209.30, which is the European and I believe the Commonwealth as well standard, then if I get selected to do those races, I'm going to go and do those races, which then means that I'll be doing a marathon in the summer and in the spring. So I'll probably end up having an earlier season break and then building into the Valencia half marathon again, or the World Half Marathon Champs in Copenhagen. So there's key points in the season I try to focus around. But then if I go in Valencia 10K and run, for whatever reason, the British record, for example, it's 27:40 or maybe 39 or something around there, then I'll probably go and do a few more 5K and 10K races, or maybe even go to BU and try and get the spikes on and run a fast 5K on the trampoline track. So it's always dictated by the performance. And even though I try to plan it on a macro level, it's all just completely micro and reactive depending on what happens week in, week out. I mean, I could get injured next week and have to cross-train for 2 months. So I just try to plan it as much as possible, but then be as flexible as possible with those plans as well.
Yeah. Lots of excessive planning, but all in pencil.
Yeah, it always feels like it's wasted as well when that happens, because it's just, I spent all night on last night planning the training, and next week I'll probably erase half of it and redo it. So it's just ever changing.
This is a silly fun question. If you were to run London Marathon this weekend, the shape you're in now, do you have a time you'd predict you would do it in? Obviously, you haven't done your marathon specific training block yet, blah, blah, blah. But you're running London next week. What time would you do it in?
Do you know what? With a taper, and say if it was Valencia weekend, let's just say like last month, because that was when I was prepped to go.
Yep.
I've never done a marathon, so it's hard to say. So I don't want to say something stupid here.
You're your own coach. You put your coaching hat on. You're your own coach. Come on.
Marathon is my, I think will be my main event, my main strength. The longer it's got, the better I've been.
Okay.
I paced Malaga last year in 62:30, and I think I was running 63 for the half, so 206 pace, 207 pace, and it felt like I could have completed a marathon that day. But saying that, I've never gone past that distance. So although I'd like to think 208 at least, I know a lot of things can go wrong in a marathon to prevent you from having an A-star day. So I'll say 208:30, for example. But I'm not going in my debut. I'm not running at 208:30 pace. I'm running at 65 minutes for the first half and then trying to cut down to run 209:30. Yeah, so I won't unfortunately be able to see if that's the case or not.
No, I think that's a better way to run your first marathon, like to aim for a big negative split and then see what happens. And, you either get it, feel great, or, you have a rough day anyway, but it's, Yeah, first marathon's brutal. It's very hard. I mean, it'll be different for you because you'll be so much more durable. Have so much more experience. I heard you talking on another podcast talking about you want to be doing some over distance runs, that sort of stuff. That most people's debut in the marathon is completely different to that. Probably the biggest challenge in London is maybe not at that pace, but in general is like it gets pretty lonely out there unless you're with the pack, and there aren't many packs unless you're a Kenyan, so that can be a bit tough. Obviously, being British, it'll be helpful. You'll have a lot of fans on the field, but I look at the way Ailish ran last year, and I just thought, geez, that was a lonely day for the poor lass having to run basically the whole day solo.
And I mean, if it's as hot as last year, I could do all the heat training in the world, and I still wouldn't be adapted enough to cope with those temperatures. So, although it would help, I don't think, you're talking minutes in a marathon, aren't you, at that sort of temperature again, unless your name's Sebastian Sarway and can run 2:02 in Berlin.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can't predict the weather for London, I guess the problem with an April marathon.
Yeah, for sure, especially in London. Let's talk heat training. You've alluded to it a couple of times, and obviously, you're here on behalf of Core. You've mentioned already you do sort of 4 sessions a week, up to 4 sessions a week. Is that passive? Is that active, or both?
So all active at the minute.
Yep.
If I could get in an extra through passive, I would do. Just my current setup with moving apartments recently, I don't really have access to a sauna at the minute.
Yep.
So it's all being active. That's usually just a double day easy run. So I've just changed it to the mornings on Monday and Wednesday, and then in the evenings on Friday and Saturday. The transition is just because the hydration afterwards, if I'm running at 7:00 on the treadmill at night and then going to sleep and not drinking for 8 hours, I wake up feeling pretty rough if I don't really just drink crazy amounts. So it just means I can space it out in the day a bit more. But it's usually 10K of active training, active heat training.
And if you have to rehydrate at 7 p.m. at night, there's a good chance you're going to be up multiple times in the evening because you've had to punch so much water. So, yeah, I get that. I would not be doing anything in the evening. And also, I think sleep quality is probably affected by that core temperature being so high for so long. So,
my HRV, I noticed when I was at home originally, before I moved out, I was doing all the stuff in the morning. And as soon as I moved here, it just the way the transition was and setting up, moving furniture around, it was always running on the treadmill in the evening. And my HRV was like 50 lower every night. It was over 100 every night at home, and then as soon as I moved, in the 50s or 40s. And I think part of that was probably heat training too close to bedtime.
Yeah, well, your parents will take other credit for it, but that's a different discussion for a different podcast. That's that's fascinating insights. And do you keep that up all the time, or do you take it away at certain times to adapt to certain stimuli?
So in the taper, like the last month or so when I've raced 4 times, I think, it's been obviously a bit more sporadic. I try to, so before Valencia, my last heat session was on the Tuesday, before the Sunday. I maybe would have got a passive session on the Wednesday if I had access to a sauna, but after that, definitely not. But other than that, unless I have a hard session on a Friday, for example, I probably wouldn't heat train on the Thursday if I had a really hard session on the Friday. But other than that, I just try to keep it part of my training. The strain, once I'm used to it now, isn't that high. So I can afford to, as long as I make sure I am rehydrated, then it doesn't really have an effect on me the next day, which is just the main thing. I think even taking heat training out and just cumulative load, I just try to always manage that. And if any stimulus gets in the way of that, then I need to change it. So it just depends on the scenario, really.
Yeah. And what do you, I assume you're overdressing a bit on the treadmill, or is it just you got the heater on in the room, or both?
Yeah. So usually it depends if I'm wearing the core suit or not. Again, with moving house, that stayed at home. So since then, washing machine electricity bill has gone
brutal, man. I know
all about it.
How
much I'm spending on washing machine bills. It's usually 3 or 4 layers, and then a pair of leggings and trousers, and then so there's a gym downstairs in my apartment block, and every time I go downstairs and someone's got the aircon on, I'm like, waste of time. But luckily, with the amount of layers I wear, even with the aircon on, it's fine. But yeah, a couple like waterproof jumper, another waterproof, and then gloves and a hat, which I think make a massive difference when heat training. Actually, that usually is enough to get me in the right zone for a while.
Yeah, if you really want to be miserable heat training, the gloves and a beanie are what, like it's not even the icing on the cake. It's way more than that. It's pretty brutal.
Gloves and a hat, massive difference, and then the hood up as well. Massive. It's just limiting surface area exposure, right, to the external environment, like just keeping it all as warm as possible.
What's the maximum amount of weeks you would do a heat training block for?
To be honest, I've not got there yet because I guess I officially started tracking it in the start of September.
Yep.
And in the entire build up to Valencia, I was heat training almost identically the same week in, week out. So I'm not entirely sure where that cutoff would be because obviously the adaptations, I think the science says 4 or 5 weeks. But even with diminishing returns, if there's still returns, then I'm going to try and get them anyway. So that, to be honest, I've not looked at that research yet in terms of, I know you can transition to more passive just to maintain the adaptations, but I've just been continuing trying to increase at the minute.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing for you is like some of it's just logistics. It's easier to dress up than spend another 30 minutes in a bath or in a sauna, right? Because your limitations become energetic and time. You know, my limitations are different to yours just based on, you know, we live different lives. So for
Yeah.
you, it might just be, listen, I can't afford a third session today where I'm having to be in the sauna, right? And that might impair some running. So that makes a lot of sense in that respect. Just last one, you've got a marathon coming up or planned to do a marathon coming up. Let's talk a little bit on the training there. What will that look like for you? Is it just a matter of that Friday session changes to a more specific, or will you cut some stuff there and add some volume, like some specificity in the long run? How does it look for you?
So in writing my plan, since it's fresh in my brain, I'll kind of give a few key sessions. So transitioning from what I'm at now is slightly increasing volume just overall, but that comes from, I'm going to try and push the double threshold day a bit where I'm doing closer to 15K, 16K of volume in the morning, just to see how that goes and how I respond. And then the medium long run on the Wednesday is going to get up to around over 100 minutes. So maybe 2 hours worth of running on the Wednesday morning. And then the Friday at the minute will still stay the same at the half marathon sort of effort, but that will be like 6 times 3K or K on, K float for 20K. So still a lot of high volume in there. And then the Sunday would be, I really do like progressive sessions. So I might do like a small warm up and then do 8K steady, 8K moderate, and then 8K at kind of LT1. That'll progress. I've written in 10K, 10K, 10K. I've written in 10K, 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 and then some faster reps at the end to try and, I mean, again, this is all me just listening to the likes of Steve Magnus and just reading research where it's like doing faster reps at the end of a long run is supposedly helps train fast twitch fibers more aerobically and recruit more fast twitch fibers and things. So all of it's just trying to test, I guess, on paper science to see what happens. But a lot of that stuff will be progressive long runs and then like 4x5K at LT1, stuff like that, which is stuff I've never done before. So I need to see how it is before I try it or before I confirm and carry on doing it. But that's kind of the main structure.
Given your PBs and like trajectory, I'd suggest you're going to enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, I've always found the main benefit out of doing long fartleks, long run sessions. It's always been the case, even when I first found out I was good at like the longer stuff is when at my group in the university group, there was a marathon runner who ran 2:10 when 2:10 was actually, it still is worth talking about, but when 2:10 was actually really, really good. And I was training with him and I was like, how am I doing this? And the first session I did with him, I paced him and I got told it was 10, 1K on, 1K off. And maybe he was Spanish. I don't know if it was a translation error. I thought that meant 10K of it. It actually was 10 times 1K on, 1K off. So I think I got to 8 and I was mentally struggling. And I was like, oh, one more. And he was like, no, we've got 12K left. And then I dropped him on the last rep. And I was like, I don't really know how that's happened. I've never trained it before. But genetically, I think I'm probably more tuned to the longer stuff. Like in terms of lactate levels, my VO2 max test, I produced 6.2 millimoles of lactate when I was going flat out. So at 197 heart rate, my lactate was 6.2.
Yeah.
So it's clearly tuned to the longer stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds very much like you're ready to take on that marathon back then, let alone now. So soon you won't be able to get that lactate up at all. Don't worry.
It's a struggle. It's a struggle, honestly.
Yeah, no, it gets that way. So, no, that's been awesome. Anything more from you, Xylon?
No, I'm just annoyed because I'm injured at the moment and you're making me really miss running, like going through your specific sessions. Oh man, I miss those marathon specific things, especially too. I did have one last question for you. Your answers are really good and really succinct. Have you had any media training, or is it just appearances on podcasts, etc.?
Honestly, from my side, it just seems like waffle half the time. So I'm glad it comes across okay. Um, no, so I used to host a podcast. I did maybe over 100 episodes actually, and then
Oh
just from
wow!
YouTube videos, a lot of filming and interviews, and just doing more. It's because of like the era we live in, I guess, with especially pro running. You've got to communicate what you're doing, unless you're like a super and like top in the
Yeah.
world, like top level athlete.
Eliud Kipchoge doesn't have to say much. Everyone else has to,
No,
everyone else has to tell us what they're doing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just something I've had to learn to do. But like I started a social media brand, like covering track and field news, maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and I wanted to start a podcast. And at the time, I couldn't think of anything worse than speaking to someone on camera. So I actually brought someone else on board to help do the podcast because I wouldn't be able to speak. So I mean, you can still find old videos of me on YouTube talking at a camera in lockdown where it's terrible. But it's just, as I'm sure you're too aware, the more you do it, the better you get it. It's just as simple as that, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's all things, right? That's running, that's media, that's everything. It's jobs, it's all of it. So, yeah, no, we really appreciate you joining us, Alfie. We've got links in our show notes to your Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Is there anywhere else people can follow you, or anywhere they should follow you? Strava, anything like that?
Yeah, Strava's always a fun one if you want to look. It's just my name again, so it's pretty easy to find. I mean, yeah, everything goes on Strava, and I don't caption anything though, so it's more of like have a look at the sessions and just get
Work
some
it
cool
out.
data from it. But
Work it out for yourself. What I've been doing. So,
yeah, a bit of
yeah,
mystery there.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Alfie. We really appreciate you joining us, and yeah, we'll
Thanks for.
keep.
Yeah, our listeners are going to specifically ask the London Marathon question so that people can follow you for the next few months and see what that outcome will be. So, yeah, we'll definitely have all those links in the show notes down below where people can follow you. But thanks for coming on. This was a treat, man.
No, brilliant. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to come on.
Was it just me who thought Alfie was very young when you saw him on video, or did you also think that?
Mate, in the intro, you read out his birth year, and then you asked him how old he was.
I'm
I
not
was
going to
like,
do maths with his birth year. It doesn't pertain to me. Like,
mate, it's 1999. It's not hard maths. It's like, what's the year? Oh, he's 1 year older than that. So I was like, sitting there when you asked that question, I was like, oh, here we go. So I mean, he does look young. I'll give him that. Like, I'm jealous of that now, but also, I knew how old he was.
you shouldn't be scared to ask stupid questions. I do that often on the podcast. Did you see how he opened up and gave us an interesting story about how people think he's young and an interesting prodigy? If I was scared to ask that stupid question, we wouldn't have that story.
It's a very good point.
It opens up it unlocks the human element of media. A lot of media trained people who come on, they know what to say, how to say it, and often you have to work. It wasn't the case in Alfie's case, but often you have to work harder to unlock them, and those personal things unlock them. But I really enjoyed that chat, man. Could have chatted to him for ages.
Yeah, it was really good. We actually did chat to him for quite a while afterwards.
Yeah,
So
I was like, we should still be recording.
Listeners may realize that we've got changed shirts a couple times, partially because we sort of ran out of time recording after Alfie hopped off the call. So,
Not me. Professional. I kept the shirts, same shirts, because for continuity, because we do video, consummate professional.
Or lazy with your washing.
No, I was like, oh, I need to keep the same shirt. Not that anyone will care. One listener might notice and care, but anyway.
We've had this discussion before.
Yeah.
We have 100% talked about this before. Right.
Before we go, should we get to the doctor's office?
Yeah, this was interesting. This is flying around social media. Our chief meme officer, Spencer Haderbeck, also sent it to us. So we have a runner in the doctor's office this week who is suing Nike for a foot fracture. Basically, so it's a former D1 runner, Div 1 NCAA runner, who she ran track and field and cross country for Cal Berkeley. Well, she ran track, not track and field. Her name is Heather Cerney or Cerney. Can't decide. Depends, I guess, on how she decides. But she ran this Turkey Trot, which is a 5-mile race. Brand new pair of Alpha Flies, and after the race, where she placed first in her age group, apparently, I think second overall, she said she developed severe foot pain in her left foot. She went and got testing, and obviously the pain was caused by a fracture which then necessitated what was called painful and invasive surgery. Like, I would say all surgery is invasive. Most of it's somewhat painful. Take what you want from that. This was on a sesamoid bone. So this gets a little bit technical.
What's a sesamoid bone?
Well, so sesamoid is a description of a type of bone. Your kneecap is actually a sesamoid bone.
Okay.
And these bones, a sesamoid bone by definition, exists within a tendon. And the goal of that is to improve the leverage of that tendon. So if you think about just a standard fulcrum, if we put your kneecap there and then we have the tendon going around it, it's got better leverage. So it's got better force production. Now, the sesamoid bones, so that is a sesamoid bone. The sesamoid bone, or the sesamoid bones, exist underneath your big toe joint. So they sit there. So there are two of them, mostly two, sometimes less, but it's usually two, one either side, that sit underneath the big toe joint here. So you kind of got your toe, and then you got your, what we call the metatarsal. Metatarsal. They sit underneath there. And so what they allow is they sit on the ground and allow this bone to translate backwards, and then the toe joint to sort of flip up there. So it's not just a hinge, there's a little translation in it. And all of this relates to what's called the windlass mechanism, which is where the plantar fascia tightens around that joint and can sort of stiffen the foot a little bit here and supinate the foot. I'm rusty on this. If Nid is listening, he's like cringing at this. It's been a while since I've explained the windlass mechanism and all the terminology and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can't draw diagrams, but the long story short here is these bones are super important for the way that your toe joint works and therefore the way your whole foot works. They can be very painful if there is an issue with them, and they are an absolute nightmare to heal once there's an issue with them because they've got such high pressure. If you imagine basically your whole body weight on a tiny little thing, the size of the bottom of a pen, basically, not the ball point of a pen, but say the back of the pen. So if one of these gets an issue, once you fracture these or had an issue with them, it can be very hard. You have to be in a moon boot and or get surgery. They've got a higher risk of what we call avascular necrosis, we've talked about before, which is basically not healing because it doesn't get enough blood. So it's a real problem here. So unsurprising, she had lots of problems with it, right? Basically. The question is, did these shoes cause the issue? And she's pointing the finger at the carbon plate. She referred to a paper. I don't think we discussed it, or maybe we did discuss it on this podcast, where there's a case series from a couple of authors talking about, all of a sudden these athletes started using carbon plated shoes and ended up with stress fractures. A problem is, A, there weren't any fractures in the sesamoid. B, those are pretty weak. That's not a good level of evidence. It's pretty weak. It's like, hey, I saw this thing. It's like, great, awesome. So there's not a lot of mechanistic data there. If we think back more generally, anytime you change any factor, right? Run too much, change shoes significantly, whether that's into or out of carbon plates, low drop shoe, high cushion shoe, whatever, like big changes and swings in load are always risky for injury. What tissue gets injured will depend on the change and therefore where the stress is applied, and then your unique tissue susceptibility, so to speak. So there are certain foot types where sesamoids are certainly at bigger risks. So I strongly doubt she's going to win this case. I just don't think it's likely. And yeah, I'm not convinced that part of the reason of that I don't think she'll win is because I'm not convinced a carbon plate really loads this part of the foot up that much. I think it's going to find it hard. She's going to find that hard to prove, right? It's causality because it needs to be that. So yeah, that's my take on this. Alfie mentioned spending a good amount of time outside of carbon plated shoes, and I agree with that. I think it's important. Now, again, in someone like Alfie, if he was to do, say, 3 runs a week in them, he's still running 100 miles a week outside of carbon plated shoes, right? In our listeners, it may be that you have to spend weeks and weeks out of them and use them only once every few weeks because you're only running 3 times a week. The point here is that there is certainly benefits to being out of carbon as well as the funness of being in carbon or in special foams, right? So I don't want people to, if it's run with carbon or not run, you should be running. If you're going to choose between shoes, try and choose away from carbon every now and again, or more often than you choose carbon. It's kind of how I would put this, depending on where you lie. Because again, our listeners are a spectrum of people who are running, 200 kilometers a week, some of them, right down to probably like 15 kilometers a week or less than 10 miles a week, right? And the answers in those populations are very different, but you should be spending a good amount of time in your week outside of carbon plated shoes and probably outside of some of the real super foams as well, if you can. Although some people can't.
Yeah, let's see how this unfolds. Interested to see what the outcome is going to be. This is something I totally expected when carbon shoes came along, and some coaches were murmuring about the injuries it could cause. I was like, I wonder if we're going to see lawsuits in the future. We probably are, and if we're going to see lawsuits, it's probably going to be in America. No
Yeah,
offense,
well,
Americans.
it's a
So
very litigious society.
yeah,
So
that's what I
yeah,
mean. Yeah,
but like, where are the bodies? I'm not convinced we've seen an uptick in stress fracture rates per hour of exercise.
yeah, yeah.
So it maybe there's more exercise being done, therefore the rates go up. But maybe there is a slight uptick. Maybe what we've seen is a change in pattern of where we're getting them as well. That could be reasonable. They're maybe higher up because the force is transferred further up. But yeah, I just there's a lot of running being done for a long time. These are almost 10 years old now. So a lot of running done for a long time. I'm not convinced we've seen the bodies. Now, there is a group of runners who've only ever really run with these. That may be a different set of people as well. So
Wow. Wow. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine only ever running in carbon shoes. Wow.
not only carbon, but they've only ever run when carbon shoes have existed.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Wow.
So
Yes.
so we ran before they existed, right? Pre-carbon, post-carbon. There are a group of runners who weren't necessarily running when carbon didn't exist. So
Yeah.
that's also a different group of people.
Thanks for finding that, man. What are we watching this weekend? I am still at the time of publishing in Spain, so not watching, not watching
Jeez,
much,
mate, doing
not
well.
watching watch. Yeah, I'll
Not
just
muching
be
doing either, apparently.
exactly. I'll be in a vehicle watching the backside of professional cyclists as our videographers and photographers film them. What are you watching?
Valencia, mate. I said last week I was going to watch Valencia. We're like, no, it
Finally.
wasn't. Now I'm finally going to watch Valencia. I've been watching the stream the whole week.
Uh,
It's actually going to have something on it. So yeah, Valencia's the answer, mate.
Cool. Thanks so much for you for coming and tuning in and streaming and downloading and sharing this podcast. Thanks so much to Alfie Manthorpe for coming on. Really appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, it would mean a great deal to us and help us out with the algorithm, help us out with growth as we go into 2026 and make our plans there. We really appreciate that. David, thanks for putting this together, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, mate. See you soon.